Hello and welcome back to Grim Tales. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy dark, twisted, grim tales that send chills down your spine, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1, my name is John, and I was 32 years old when this happened. I had already been with the department for a few years by then, working night shifts in a quiet, rural part of Illinois. Most people think police work at night is all car chases, guns, and dangerous calls, but in our town, it was usually a lot slower than that. We dealt with noise complaints, drunk drivers, domestic arguments, loose dogs, kids breaking windows, and the occasional person who thought a stop sign was more of a suggestion than a law. On most nights, nothing much happened. The roads were dark, the cornfields went on forever, and the towns looked half asleep by 10. The streetlights flickered over empty sidewalks. Gas stations stayed open with one tired clerk behind the counter. Sometimes the only movement for miles was the glow of our headlights sweeping over road signs and ditches. I did not mind it. I had always liked quiet. Quiet made the job feel manageable. My partner that night was Miller. He was my senior partner, a 10-year veteran who had been around long enough to stop getting impressed by anything. He was the kind of man who could sit beside you in a patrol car for an entire shift and say maybe 20 words. He did not talk unless he had something useful to say, and even then, he kept it short. He had seen more than me, handled worse than me, and carried himself with that hard calm some cops get after too many years of nights, bad news, and paperwork. I trusted him. That matters, because after what we saw that night, I sometimes wondered if I would have believed it happened at all if Miller had not been there with me. It was about a year ago. The shift had been quiet up to that point. We had stopped one driver for a broken taillight, checked on an old man who called because he thought someone was walking around his barn, and grabbed coffee from a gas station that tasted like it had been sitting there since noon. I remember the night clearly because it was colder than it should have been. Not freezing, but damp and sharp. The kind of cold that gets into your sleeves and sits there. The call came in a little after midnight. A possible break-in at the local morgue. Miller and I both looked at each other when dispatch said it. You do not get many calls like that. People break into houses, stores, cars, sheds, and sometimes schools. They do not usually break into morgues. There is not much there for a normal thief. At least, not much anyone sane would want. Still, it was not impossible. Morgues and medical facilities can have chemicals, equipment, and sometimes drugs or supplies that addicts might think are worth stealing. People do strange things when they are desperate. We had seen that enough times to know better than to laugh off any location. Miller picked up the radio and confirmed we were on our way. The morgue sat on the edge of town, close to the county hospital, but separate from it, down a narrow service road that ran past a few low buildings and a parking lot. It was not a large place, just a squat brick building with a flat roof, a loading area in the back, and a few small windows that always seemed too dark. During the day, it looked plain and official. At night, it looked abandoned, even when people were inside. When we pulled into the lot, the custodian was standing outside near the entrance. He was a thin older man in a gray work shirt, holding a mop handle like it was a weapon. The outside lights made his face look pale. He kept glancing back at the building, then toward us, then back at the building again. He looked embarrassed and scared at the same time, the way people look when they are afraid of sounding foolish but are too frightened to stay quiet. I stepped out of the car first. Miller followed, slower, one hand resting near his belt. The custodian came toward us before we could even ask anything. His name was Harold, though I did not remember that until later when I saw it on the report. At the time, he was just a shaken man who wanted someone else to go inside. He told us he had been mopping the main hallway. The building was mostly empty, and he liked to keep the lights off in the rooms he was not cleaning because the lights buzzed and gave him headaches. He said he was working by the glow from the hall when he saw movement from the corner of his eye. At first, he thought it was a shadow. Then, it moved again. He looked up and saw someone run across the hallway ahead of him and disappear into one of the side rooms. He did not get a clear look. The lights were dim, and the person moved too fast. He could not tell if it was a man or woman at first, only that it was definitely a person. He called out, but no one answered. Then, he heard a door close somewhere farther down the hall. That was when he left the building and called us. While he spoke, his eyes kept drifting to the entrance behind him. Could it have been another employee? I asked. He shook his head fast. No, I'm the only one scheduled right now. Everyone else left hours ago. Any chance it was a patient's family member? Someone who got confused or upset? No, he said. The front was locked. The back was locked, too. I checked before I started. Miller looked toward the building. You see any sign of forced entry? Harold shook his head again. Not outside. But I know what I saw. That part stuck with me. He was scared, but he was not uncertain. He knew what he had seen, and he was not trying to make it sound more dramatic. If anything, he seemed to wish he could take it back. At first, I thought it was probably kids. Teenagers in small towns get bored, and bored teenagers do stupid things. A morgue would be the kind of place they dared each other to break into. Maybe one of them had slipped inside earlier and hidden after closing. Or maybe Harold had been alone too long in a dark building full of dead bodies and his mind had played a trick on him. But his fear felt real enough that we could not ignore it. We told him to stay behind us and unlock the door. The moment we stepped inside, the air changed. Morgues have a smell that is hard to explain if you have never been in one. It is not always the smell of death, at least not directly. It is cleaner than people imagine, full of disinfectant, cold air, old tile, metal, and something chemical underneath. But there is always another layer, something your body notices before your brain does, something that reminds you what the building is for. The hallway lights were on now, but not all of them. A few buzzed faintly overhead. The floors were freshly mopped, and the shine reflected the light in long, pale streaks. Our boots made soft, squeaking sounds as we walked. Miller and I started calling out. Police department. If anyone is inside, make yourself known. No answer. We moved slowly down the main corridor with Harold behind us. He kept close enough that I could hear his breathing. We checked the rooms one by one. The first was a small office with paperwork stacked in trays and a computer sleeping on the desk. Empty, the second was a storage room with cleaning supplies, boxes of gloves, and extra gowns. Empty, the third, was a small lab space with counters, cabinets, and medical tools laid out neatly. Empty, everything looked normal, but the silence felt wrong. Not total silence. There were little sounds everywhere. The hum of vents, the buzz of old lights, a faint metallic tick from somewhere deep in the building. But no human movement, no whispering, no footsteps running away, no giggling kids trying not to be caught. Harold whispered that the person had gone farther down the hall, near the left side. Miller gave me a look, and we split just enough to check opposite sides, still keeping each other in sight. I entered a dark room on the right. My hand found the light switch by the door, and the room blinked awake with a tired fluorescent glow. It was a waiting room for families. There were a few chairs, a low table with old magazines, a box of tissues, and a wall with framed prints of peaceful landscapes. Someone had tried to make it comforting, but it only made the room feel sadder. I could imagine grieving people sitting there, holding each other's hands, waiting for news they already knew. I swept the room quickly, behind the chairs, under the table, behind the half-open closet. Nothing, I was just stepping back into the hall when Miller's voice cracked through the building. "Hey, stop. Turn around." The words hit me like a jolt of electricity. I rushed out of the waiting room and saw Miller standing in the hallway with his gun drawn. He was aiming toward the far end of the corridor where the lights were dimmer and a corner turned left. "She went around the corner," he said. "She?" I asked. "Woman, long hair. Move." Harold had gone even paler. He pointed a shaking hand toward the left turn. "That side is a dead end," he said. "There's nowhere else to go." That should have made us feel better. If the intruder had run into a dead end, we had her cornered. We could talk her down. Maybe she was on something. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she had broken in for reasons we did not understand yet. We moved toward the corner, slow and careful. "Police," I called. "We just want to talk. Keep your hands where we can see them." No answer. I could hear my own breathing. Miller was a step behind and to my right. Harold stayed farther back, frozen near the wall. I reached the corner and peeked around it. At the end of the short hallway stood a woman. She was facing away from us at first, standing near a large gray door. The hallway was darker there, with only one weak light overhead. I could not make out her face, but I could see her long, fair hair hanging down her back. She was barefoot, or at least I thought she was. Her posture was strange, too still, like she had stopped moving only because we were looking at her. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice calm, "you're not in trouble if you cooperate. Just turn around slowly." She turned her head slightly. I took one step forward. The moment she noticed me, she moved. She spun toward the gray door, grabbed the handle, and pulled it open. The movement was fast and jerky, almost too fast for someone who had been standing so still. She slipped through the doorway and slammed it shut behind her. I ran to the door and grabbed the handle. Locked, I banged on it with the side of my fist. "Police, open the door." Nothing. Miller came up beside me, gun still drawn. "She in there?" "She went through," I said. Door locked behind her. Harold stared at the door in confusion. "That can't be right." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "That door doesn't lock from the inside," he said. His voice had dropped to almost nothing. "It only locks from out here." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Miller said, "Open it." Harold fumbled with his keys. They jingled loudly in the hall, too loud in that quiet place. It took him 2 tries to get the right one into the lock. His hands were shaking badly. The lock clicked. Miller and I positioned ourselves on either side of the door. I counted softly. Then Harold pulled it open, and we went in with our flashlights raised. The room beyond was cold. I know the whole building was cold, but this room felt different. The air hit my face like it had been sealed away for days. My breath caught in my throat, and for a second my flashlight beam shook across the walls. The room was not large. It looked like a prep or storage area, with metal cabinets, rolling carts, equipment, and a few covered containers along the wall. There were no windows. The floor was clean. The corners were clear. No other doors, no hiding places large enough for an adult. The woman was not there. Miller swept left. I swept right. We checked behind carts, under tables, inside the only tall cabinet that could have hidden someone. Nothing. "She came in here," I said, though even as I said it, I heard the doubt in my own voice. Miller did not answer. Then my flashlight settled on 2 gurneys in the center of the room. One was empty. The other was covered with a white sheet. There was a body-shaped lump beneath it. I wish I could say I understood immediately. I wish I could say some part of me knew before we got close. But in that moment, my mind still wanted a normal answer. I thought the woman might be hiding behind the gurney, or under it, or somehow curled beside the covered body. I thought maybe we had missed something in the room. Then the smell reached me. It was not the normal chemical smell of the morgue. It was stronger, sickly, sweet and rotten at the same time. The smell of decay. Once you know it, you never forget it. Harold covered his mouth with one hand. Miller looked at me, and I could see in his face that he did not want me to lift the sheet. But I did. I grabbed the edge of the white sheet and pulled it back. The woman lying beneath it had long, fair hair. The same long, fair hair we had just seen at the end of the hallway. For a second, my brain split in two. One part of me saw the body clearly. Pale skin, closed eyes, still mouth, a toe tag tied to her foot. The other part kept seeing her standing by the door only moments earlier, turning her head toward us, moving fast, slipping inside. Harold made a sound behind me, not a scream. Something smaller, like the air had been punched out of him. Miller stepped closer and read the tag. The woman had been brought in 4 days earlier. She had been dead for 4 days. No one said anything for a long time. There are moments in life when everyone in a room understands the same impossible thing, but no one wants to be the first to say it. That was one of those moments. Miller had seen her. I had seen her. Harold had seen someone moving in the hall before we arrived. And now that same woman was lying on a gurney in front of us, cold, dead, and tagged like paperwork. I looked around the room again, desperate for some trick I had missed, a vent large enough to crawl through, a second door hidden behind equipment, a loose panel, anything. There was nothing. The door she had slammed was the only way in or out, and Harold swore it could not lock from inside. Miller finally lowered his gun. "Cover her," he said quietly. I put the sheet back. We finished clearing the building because procedure demanded it, but none of us believed we would find anyone else. Every room was empty. Every exterior door was locked. There were no broken windows, no signs of forced entry, and no footprints except ours and Harold's on the freshly mopped floor. Back at the station, we wrote the report as carefully as we could without saying what had really happened. Possible trespasser. Building searched. No suspect located. No signs of forced entry. Custodian advised to contact supervisor and improve lighting. That was it. We did not write that a dead woman had run from us. We did not write that she had locked herself inside a room that could not be locked from the inside. We did not write that the body under the sheet was the same person we had chased only seconds before. You cannot put a ghost in an official police report. They do not give you a medal for that. They give you a psychological evaluation, a desk job, and a reputation that follows you for the rest of your career. So Miller and I buried it. Harold never pushed the matter, and I think he was grateful we did not ask him to explain it again. The morgue staff called it confusion, stress, maybe a mistake in the dark. Everyone accepted the boring answer because boring answers let people sleep. Miller retired 3 months later. He sold his house, packed up, and moved down south. He said it was time. He said his knees hurt, the winters were getting old, and he wanted somewhere warm. Maybe all of that was true. Miller was never the kind of man to explain himself twice. But before he left, we sat together in the patrol car one last time after shift. We did not talk about the morgue directly. We never had. But at the end, he looked out through the windshield and said, "Some doors should stay shut." Then he got out and went home. I still work nights sometimes. I still drive past the morgue when calls take me that way. The building looks the same as it always did. Brick walls, flat roof, dark windows, nothing moving inside, nothing that anyone else would notice. But every time I pass it, I look at the gray side door in my mind. I remember the sound of it slamming. I remember the locked handle under my hand. I remember the cold room and the smell of decay. Most of all, I remember her hair, long and fair, moving as she turned away from us. We never talked about what we saw, not in the paperwork, not at the precinct, and not with the other officers. We buried it as deep as we could. But you cannot really bury something like that. Not when it was already dead. Story 2. Once, deep in the woods, there was a place where the trees grew so tall that their branches almost touched the clouds. The animals who lived there called the largest tree the big tree, because no one had ever found one bigger. Its trunk was wider than a house, its roots rose from the ground like sleeping snakes, and its branches stretched across the sky like roads. Families of squirrels, bats, birds, and other small creatures lived in its hollow spaces, its knots, its high nests, and its safe hidden rooms. To outsiders, it looked like an ordinary old tree, but to the animals of the woods, it was a whole town standing upright. Chappie lived with his family in one of the smaller holes on the cold side of the big tree. Their home was not much. The walls were rough, the floor was uneven, and whenever it rained, water leaked through one thin crack near the ceiling. His mother stuffed the crack with moss every few days, but the moss always came loose again. His father said he would fix it properly one day, but everyone knew there was never enough time and never enough nuts. That was the way life was for Chappie's family. They were poor. They did not have large stores of nuts like the other squirrel families. They did not have smooth wooden shelves stacked high with acorns, walnuts, and chestnuts. They did not have warm blankets made from soft leaves and stolen cotton. They had what they could find, what they could save, and what his father could earn. Chappie's father was a nut picker. In the woods, that meant something. There were nut pickers, and there were nut processors. The nut pickers climbed the trees, crossed the dangerous branches, searched the forest floor, and gathered whatever nuts nature gave them. Their paws were always scratched, their backs always tired, and their lives depended on luck and weather. Nut processors were different. They owned the storage rooms, the cracking stones, the drying racks, and the trading stalls. They bought nuts from pickers, cleaned them, sorted them, packed them, and sold them for more. Everyone in the big tree knew this. Everyone knew there were those who worked with their paws and those who counted with their claws. Chappie's family worked with their paws. That was why Chappie knew better than to ask for too much. When winter came, he ate smaller portions without being told. When his mother pretended she was not hungry, he pretended not to notice. When his father came home with cracked claws and tired eyes, Chappie did not complain about the cold or the thin blankets. He understood that life was not fair, even though he was still young. The other squirrels his age had smooth fur, round cheeks, and little bags full of roasted nuts. Chappie was thinner than them. His tail was not as full. His paws were quicker, because they had to be. But being poor was not the thing that bothered him most. What bothered him most was that his parents never let him leave the big tree after dusk. They were strict about it. Not just careful, strict. When the evening shadows began to stretch across the bark and the birds became quiet, Chappie had to come inside. No arguments, no excuses. His father would stand near the entrance of their hollow with his arms crossed, and his mother would look out through the little round opening as if she expected something to come crawling up the trunk. They never explained why. Chappie asked once, when he was very small, and his father's face changed in a way Chappie never forgot. It was not anger. It was fear. His father had looked past him, out toward the woods, and for a moment Chappie saw something old and painful behind his eyes. Something that did not belong to an ordinary warning. Something that came from memory. After dusk, his father had said quietly, "You stay inside," that was all. Chappie never asked again. He trusted his parents. They were stern, but they were fair. They did not lie to him for fun, and they did not scare him unless they believed there was a reason. Still, as he grew older, curiosity began to itch inside him. He watched other animals move through the evening. He saw bats waking up, owls opening their eyes, and fireflies floating like tiny lanterns through the dark grass. The forest looked different at dusk. Softer, deeper, almost magical. Sometimes Chappie wondered what he was missing. On that particular evening, the woods were calm and still, as if the whole world was holding its breath. The last orange light of the sun slipped through the leaves, turning the branches gold. Shadows gathered slowly along the trunk of the big tree. They moved across Chappie's face like a quiet parade, thin and delicate, one after another. He was perched on a branch near the entrance to his family's hollow, holding a small nut between his paws. He should have gone inside already. His mother had called him twice. His father was not home yet, which was the only reason Chappie had not been forced inside. He told himself he would stay just one more minute to feel the cool evening air, one more minute to watch the light fade, one more minute to pretend he was brave. That was when he saw Bernice. At first, he thought he must be mistaken. Bernice did not come to this part of the big tree. Her family lived higher up, where the bark was smoother and the hollows were wider. Her father owned the largest nut factory in the entire wood, a place in Squirrelton where hundreds of nuts were cracked, sorted, and packed every day. Everyone knew Bernice's family. They were rich, not just comfortable. Rich, they had more nuts than they could eat in 3 winters. They had workers, storage rooms, polished shells for decoration, and soft beds made from the finest moss. Bernice herself always looked perfect. Her fur was brushed, her tail was full and bright, and she wore little ribbons around one ear when she came to market. Chappie had never spoken to her much. They lived in the same world, but not the same life. She was the daughter of a processor. He was the son of a picker. That difference was bigger than any branch between them. So what was she doing down here at dusk? Chappie leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. Bernice stood on a lower branch near the edge of the tree, facing the woods. She was not moving. That was the first strange thing. Bernice was usually quick and lively, always looking around as if she expected people to notice her. But now, she stood completely still. Her tail hung low, her paws rested at her sides, her head was tilted slightly toward the dark bushes below. She looked like she was listening to something. Chappie's stomach tightened. Before he could call out to her, something dropped from the branch above him. "Good morning, Chappie." Chappie nearly jumped out of his fur. His paws squeezed the nut so hard it almost cracked. "Lars," he hissed. "Don't scare me like that. I almost dropped my nut." Lars hung upside down from the branch above him, his dark wings wrapped loosely around his body. Lars was a bat, and his family worked night security around the big tree and the nearby districts. Bats were respected for that. They saw well in the dark, heard things others missed, and knew the secret paths through the night. Chappie liked Lars, even though Lars enjoyed appearing out of nowhere far too much. But this time, Lars was not laughing. He was staring past Chappie. At Bernice. Chappie looked back down. Bernice was still standing there, facing the bushes. The darkness around her seemed thicker than the rest of the woods. The sun had almost disappeared now, and the space between the trees had turned blue and gray. "Hey, Chappie," Lars said softly. His voice had changed. The humor was gone. What? Isn't that Betty the turtle? Chappie followed the direction of Lars's wing. At first, he saw only the bushes. Their leaves were dark and still. Then, something moved between them. A small shape stepped into view. Chappie's breath caught in his throat. Yeah, he whispered. You're right, Lars. It was Betty. Or at least, it looked like Betty. Chappie and Betty had never seen eye to eye. That was a polite way of putting it. Betty had always been strange, even before she disappeared. She was slow, quiet, and hard to understand. She wore thick, round glasses that made her eyes look much bigger than they were. She spent most of her time near the pond, watching the water and muttering things to herself. Some animals said she was clever. Others said she was rude. Chappie only knew that every time they met, they ended up arguing. The last time anyone had seen Betty was months ago, shortly after the pond trip. No one talked much about the pond trip anymore. It had been organized as a small outing for the younger animals of the Big Tree in Squirrelton. A simple afternoon near the water, supervised by adults, with games, food, and stories. Chappie had not been allowed to go because his parents said they needed him at home. At the time, he had been furious. Everyone else went. Bernice went. Lars went for part of it, though he slept through most of the afternoon under a broad leaf. Betty went too. After that day, Betty vanished. Some said she had wandered away. Some said she had fallen into the pond. Some said her family had quietly moved to another part of the forest out of shame or grief. Adults always stopped talking when children came near. That was how Chappie knew there was more to it. And now Betty was here, at dusk, near Bernice. She stepped out from the bushes slowly. Her shell looked dull and dirty. Mud clung to her feet. Her head hung low, and her glasses sat crooked on her face. She looked thinner somehow, though turtles were hard to read. There was something wrong with the way she moved. She was not just slow. She was stiff, as though each step hurt her, or as though something inside her shell was pulling her strings. Chappie felt his fur rise along his back. Betty stopped a few feet behind Bernice. Bernice did not turn around. Why isn't Bernice moving? Chappie whispered. Lars did not answer. Betty lifted one trembling paw and removed her glasses. Chappie had never seen her without them before. Her eyes were sunken deep into her face. They looked tired and dark, like she had not slept in months. The skin around them was dry and cracked. Her stare was empty, but not peaceful. It was the kind of emptiness that made Chappie think of an old burrow after the family inside had died or moved away. Something had lived there once. Something had looked out. But now there was only a hollow space. Where has she been? Lars whispered. Chappie could not answer. His instincts were screaming at him now. Every old fear passed down through squirrel blood woke inside him. The same hidden warning that made his parents drag him inside before nightfall. The same warning he had never understood. Run, hide, do not make a sound. Then Lars made a small choking noise. Hey man, he said, his voice shaking. Isn't that a knife? Chappie looked. Betty's other paw hung low beside her shell. In it was something long and dull, catching the last bit of evening light. A knife. Not a clean kitchen knife from one of the homes. Not a polished tool from the nut factory. This blade was old, rusty, and ugly. Its edge looked uneven. Its handle was wrapped in something dark that might have been cloth or might have been dried moss. It seemed too large for Betty's paw, and yet she held it with strange purpose. Bernice, Chappie tried to call, but his voice came out as a thin squeak. Bernice did not hear him, or maybe she could not. She continued staring into the bushes, into the darkness, into the woods beyond the safe roots of the big tree. Her face was calm, too calm. She looked like she was dreaming with her eyes open. Betty moved closer. One slow step, then another. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Lars's claws tightened around the branch above Chappie. Chappie could hear the tiny scrape of them against bark. He wanted to move. He wanted to shout. He wanted to leap down and push Bernice away. But fear pinned him in place. Betty reached Bernice's back. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then, Betty raised the knife. The blade lifted slowly above her head, heavy and dull in the dying light. It was not a graceful movement. It was stiff and awkward, like an old elevator rising on broken cables. Chappie finally found his voice. "Bernice." The knife came down. It struck the back of Bernice's neck with a wet, awful sound. The blade was dull, but it did not stop. It tore through fur and skin, forced its way into the fragile place between neck and spine, and stuck there. Bernice's body jerked. Her paws opened. A small nut she had been holding fell from her hand and bounced once on the branch before dropping into the shadows below. Lars and Chappie both stopped breathing. The sound that came next was worse than the strike itself. Rusty metal scraped against bone. Betty wiggled the blade, not quickly, not in panic, slowly, with malice, as if she wanted to make sure it hurt. Bernice's mouth opened, but no scream came out. Her eyes widened. Her legs shook beneath her. For a moment, she stayed standing, held up by shock more than strength. Then, blood began to pour down her neck. Chappie had seen blood before. Small cuts, scraped paws, a bird taken by a fox. But he had never seen anything like this. It came in bright, terrible streams, running over Bernice's fur, dripping onto the branch, falling to the forest floor below. Then it sprayed in little bursts when she tried to breathe. The green leaves beneath her turned dark. The bark shone wet. The earth below, once soft and brown and alive, became painted red in the fading light. The woods, which had seemed calm and beautiful only minutes before, changed into something else. The shadows no longer looked delicate. They looked hungry. The trees no longer looked wise. They looked like silent witnesses that had seen this before and would see it again. Betty leaned closer to Bernice's ear. Chappie could not hear what she said, if she said anything at all. Then Bernice began to fall. Her knees bent. Her body tipped forward. The knife remained in her neck, sticking out at a horrible angle. She hit the branch first, then rolled from it. For one breathless second, she hung in the air, her ribbon fluttering near her ear. Then she struck the forest floor with a soft, final thud. Chappie made a sound he did not recognize. Lars covered his mouth with one wing. Below them, Bernice lay on her side. Her eyes were still open. Her mouth moved slightly. The blood continued to spread around her, soaking into moss and dirt and roots. Betty climbed down after her with slow, careful movements. The knife was still lodged in Bernice's neck, and each time Bernice's body twitched, the handle moved. Chappie wanted to look away. He could not. Betty stood over Bernice. For the first time, Bernice seemed to wake from whatever trance had held her. Her eyes shifted. She looked confused, then afraid. Her lips trembled. She seemed to be trying to understand why the world had become cold so quickly. Her smile, the soft and pretty smile everyone knew from Squirrelton, appeared for half a second. It was weak and drooping, fading as soon as it came. Perhaps she saw Chappie and Lars in the branches above. Perhaps she saw someone else. Perhaps she saw nothing at all. Then she spoke. It was barely a whisper, not a scream, not a plea, just a small, broken sentence that floated up through the blood-warm air and settled inside Chappie forever. I can't feel my legs, Lars whimpered. Chappie's paws went numb around his nut. Betty slowly turned her head upward. She looked directly at them. Without her glasses, her sunken eyes seemed far too large in her tired face. She did not look angry. She did not look afraid. She looked empty, worse than empty. She looked like something had hollowed her out and was now using what remained. Chappie knew with sudden cold certainty that Betty had seen them the whole time. The knife shifted in Bernice's neck as her body gave one final twitch. Then the woods went silent. Not normal silent, not evening silent. This was deeper. The insects stopped. The leaves stopped moving. Even the wind seemed to leave the forest. The only sound was Chappie's heartbeat pounding in his ears. Lars leaned closer. Shaky, Chappie, he whispered. We need to go. Chappie wanted to move, but his body would not listen. He stared down at Bernice, the rich girl from Squirrelton, the daughter of the biggest nut processor in the woods, the girl who should have been safe behind polished doors and full storage rooms, the girl who should have been helping her father at the factory, not lying under the big tree in a widening pool of blood. Betty reached down. For a moment, Chappie thought she was going to pull the knife free. Instead, she placed one paw gently on Bernice's head. The gesture was almost kind. That made it worse. Then, Betty looked toward the dark bushes again, the same place Bernice had been staring before the attack. Chappie followed her gaze, even though every instinct told him not to. Something moved there. Not Betty. Not another animal he knew. Just a shape between the leaves. Tall, still waiting, Chappie could not see it clearly. The darkness was too thick now. But he saw enough. A long shape, thin as a dead branch, with something pale where a face might be. For 1 second, he felt sure it was looking at him. Then it slipped backward into the woods and disappeared. Betty picked up her glasses from where they had fallen near the roots. She placed them back on her face with slow care. With the glasses on, she looked almost like herself again. Almost like the odd turtle who had argued with Chappie near the pond months ago. Almost then she turned and walked back into the bushes. No hurry, no fear. The leaves closed behind her. Only then did Chappie's body remember how to move. He scrambled backward so fast he nearly fell from the branch. Lars grabbed him with one wing and pulled him up. Inside, Lars whispered. Now, they ran along the branch toward the hollow places of the big tree. Chappie's nut slipped from his paws and vanished into the dark. But he did not care. Behind him, the forest remained silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that follows something terrible, because even the world does not know what to say. When Chappie reached his family's hollow, his mother was waiting at the entrance. The moment she saw his face, her own face changed. She did not ask where he had been. She did not scold him. She simply pulled him inside and wrapped both arms around him. His father stood behind her. He had returned while Chappie was outside. His work pouch still hung from his shoulder, half full of the small nuts he had gathered that day. His claws were dirty. His eyes were tired. But when Chappie looked at him, he saw the same expression he had seen years ago when he asked why he could not leave after dusk. Fear, his father already knew. Maybe not the details. Maybe not about Bernice or Betty or the knife. But he knew something had happened. Something from the night had come close to the big tree again. Chappie tried to speak, but all that came out was a broken squeak. His mother held him tighter. Outside, somewhere below, a single scream finally rose through the woods. It was not Bernice. It was someone who had found her. The big tree woke in terror. Doors opened. Voices shouted. Wings beat the air. Squirrels rushed from hollow to hollow. Bats swept down toward the roots. Parents pulled children inside. Locks were set. Old prayers were whispered. For the first time in Chappie's life, he understood that all the rules, all the warnings, all the fear in his parents' eyes had never been about keeping him from fun. They had been about keeping him alive. That night, no one in the big tree slept. Chappie sat by the small round opening of his family's hollow, staring out into the darkness, while his mother cried quietly behind him. His father stood beside the entrance with a sharpened piece of bone in his paw, though Chappie knew it would not be enough against whatever he had seen in the bushes. Far below, the place where Bernice had fallen was hidden by darkness, but Chappie could still picture it. Her fading smile, the blood on the leaves, Betty's empty eyes, the terrible sound of metal against bone, and her final words, "I can't feel my legs." They repeated in his mind again and again until they no longer sounded like words. They sounded like a warning, like a curse, like the beginning of something much worse. Just before dawn, when the sky was still gray and the forest was holding its breath again, Chappie saw movement near the edge of the woods. A small shape stood between the bushes. A turtle. Betty, she was far away, but Chappie knew it was her. She stood very still, looking up at the big tree. Her glasses reflected the faint morning light, hiding her eyes. Then, slowly, she raised one paw. At first, Chappie thought she was waving. Then he saw what she held. Not the knife. A ribbon. A little ribbon from Bernice's ear. Chappie backed away from the opening, shaking so hard his teeth clicked together. His father stepped forward and looked out. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he whispered. It has started again. Chappie wanted to ask what he meant. He wanted to ask what had happened at the pond trip. He wanted to ask where Betty had been for all those months. He wanted to ask what thing had stood in the bushes, watching while Bernice died. He wanted to ask why the night wanted the children of the big tree. But he did not ask. Because deep inside, in the small, ancient part of him that understood claws, shadows, and danger, Chappie already knew one thing. Some questions were not safe after dusk. And in the woods around the big tree, dusk always came back. Story 3. I know this might sound strange, and I know a lot of stories like this are usually written for fun, but I did not sit down and plan this one like a normal story. I did not make an outline, choose characters, or think of a scary ending. I dreamed it. My brain made it while I was asleep, so I guess in a way I technically created it, but it did not feel like something I had control over. It felt like I had watched something I was never meant to see, and when I woke up, the images were still stuck in my head. I am writing it down because I do not know what else to do with it. The dream was so clear in some places and so strange in others that it has stayed with me all day. Most dreams begin to fall apart once you wake up. You remember a few pieces, then the details fade, and by lunchtime, you are left with only a feeling. This one did not fade like that. The more I thought about it, the more the details seemed to settle into place. It felt less like a dream and more like a memory from a video I had actually watched online. This happened in my dream on June 4th, 2026. I remember the date very clearly, which is odd because dreams usually do not care about exact dates. In the dream, I was not inside the scary situation myself. I was watching a review video about an analog horror series or short film. It had that familiar internet horror feeling, like old VH footage, low-quality sound, dim rooms, and something terrible hiding in plain sight. I do not remember the name of the channel, and I do not remember the title of the video. I only remember that the video was about a tall, lanky pink cat creature. The dream did not start with me looking at the creature right away. It started with the review video playing. There was a narrator talking over the footage. But his voice was strange. It sounded muffled, almost like he was speaking through a wall or underwater. I could tell he was explaining something, maybe talking about the story, the meaning, or the background of the horror series, but I could not understand most of his words. The voice was there, but it did not feel important. The footage was what mattered. The clip being reviewed began inside a house, in a bathroom. The person holding the camera seemed to be the owner of a cat. I could see their hands in the food bowl, but I do not remember seeing their face. The bathroom was very dim. It did not look like any light was on inside the room. The only light came from the hallway outside the open bathroom door. That hallway light spilled across the floor, making the doorway look bright compared to the dark bathroom. The person was filling a cat food bowl. I could hear the dry food rattling against the inside of the bowl. It was such a normal sound, and that somehow made everything worse. The sound reminded me of ordinary mornings, of pets waiting to be fed, of simple routines inside a safe home. But in the dream, that ordinary sound had a nervous edge to it. It felt like the person was not feeding their pet because they wanted to. It felt like they were doing it because they had to. The camera moved toward the open bathroom door. Just outside the doorway, in the light from the hallway, sat a normal cat. It was an adult cat with medium-length fur, the kind of cat you might see in any house. There was nothing unusual about it. It looked healthy, calm, and very still. Its paws were planted neatly in front of it, and its tail was wrapped around its body. It was waiting for food like any patient house cat might wait. Then the camera shifted slightly to the left. That was when I saw the pink cat. It was standing beside the real cat, but it did not look like anything that should exist in a house. It was tall, much taller than a normal cat. Not tall like a large dog, exactly, but tall in a stretched, unnatural way. Its legs were long and thin, almost too long for its body. Its torso was incredibly skinny, like there was barely anything under its fur. It had the shape of a cat only in the loosest sense, as if someone had taken the idea of a cat and pulled it out until all the proportions were wrong. Its fur was bright pink and shaggy. Not soft-looking in the way real animal fur looks soft, but fake-looking. It reminded me of cheap polyester faux fur, like the kind you might see on a costume, a stuffed toy, or some strange art project. The fur hung from its body in uneven patches, making it look both fluffy and sick at the same time. It was not a natural pink either. It was too bright, too flat, and too artificial, almost like it had been dyed or made from a material that was never alive. The pink cat could not stay still. While the normal cat sat quietly beside it, the pink cat kept moving in place. It stretched its long legs. It shifted its weight. It leaned forward and then pulled back. It twisted its thin body slightly, then adjusted again. It never fully sat down. It looked restless and hungry, like it was barely able to control itself. And it was loud. It kept meowing at the owner, over and over again. The sound was not exactly a normal meow. It was close enough that you could recognize it as a cat sound. But there was something off about it. It was too long, too forceful, and too desperate. It sounded like begging, but not in a cute way. It sounded demanding. Every meow felt like it was saying, "Give it to me now, feed me now, look at me now." The owner lowered the food bowl just outside the bathroom door, but he did not fully step out. He seemed afraid to cross that line between the dark bathroom and the lit hallway. The bowl touched the floor, and for a moment the pink cat leaned forward, its body stretching even more, but it did not eat. The normal cat did not move either. It stayed beside the pink cat, still and quiet, like it knew better than to go first. That was one of the strangest parts. The normal cat did not act scared. Not exactly. It did not hiss or run away. It simply waited. It acted like it understood the order of things in that house. The pink cat ate first. The pink cat had power. The normal cat accepted that. It sat with its feet planted and its tail wrapped around its front, barely moving, while the thing beside it cried and begged for food. Then I noticed the pink cat's face. Its face was the worst part of it. In the dream, I remember thinking that its face looked exactly like the poster for that Japanese horror movie house. Not just a little similar, but almost exactly like it. It had that strange, wide, painted-looking cat face. The eyes, nose, and mouth were all dark blue, but not dull. They sparkled in a deep, unnatural way, as if tiny bits of glitter or wet glass were caught inside them. Every bit of light from the hallway seemed to gather there. The rest of the creature was bright, fake pink, but the face had those shining, dark blue features that pulled your attention and would not let go. The pink cat never looked away from the owner. That detail still bothers me. Animals look around. Even when they are hungry, cats blink, glance at the food, check their surroundings, flick their ears. This thing did not do that. Its gaze stayed locked on the person holding the camera. It stared with a desperate, fixed hunger. It wanted the food, but it was not looking at the bowl. It was looking at the owner. Its mouth opened and closed with each loud meow, and the sparkling blue shape of its mouth seemed too flat and too dark, like a cutout placed on top of its face. I had the awful feeling that if the owner moved too suddenly, the pink cat would spring forward with those long legs and cross the doorway in 1 second. But it did not. It only stood there, stretching, shifting, meowing, and staring. The normal cat beside it remained calm. That made the scene even more uncomfortable. If the normal cat had been terrified, maybe the danger would have felt clear. But because it sat there as if this was routine, it made me feel like this pink thing had been in the house for a while. Long enough for the real cat to understand it. Long enough for the owner to know that feeding time had rules. Then the camera moved a little, and I saw something attached to the pink cat's right shoulder. At first, I did not understand what I was seeing. It looked like a lump of fur sitting on the pink creature's shoulder. Then the image became clearer. There was another cat, a dead one. A taxidermy cat was stapled to the pink cat's shoulder. It was a brown tabby, fixed in a sitting position just like the normal cat on the floor. Its fur was faded light brown, old and dry looking. Its body was stiff and still, pressed against the pink creature's shoulder as if someone had placed it there and forced it to stay. Its eyes were cloudy blue, like glass eyes that had gone bad, or like real eyes covered in cataracts. They stared forward without seeing anything. The staples were not shown in a close-up, but somehow I knew they were there. I knew the dead tabby had been attached to the pink cat, not carried gently or held in place by accident. It was part of the creature's body now, or at least part of what it chose to wear. Neither cat reacted to it. The normal cat did not look at the taxidermy tabby. The pink cat did not seem bothered by the dead cat stuck to its shoulder. It kept meowing and moving as if the extra body was nothing. But I could tell from the owner's movements that the taxidermy cat disturbed him more than anything else. The camera kept glancing back and forth between the pink cat's face and the dead tabby on its shoulder. The owner's hand shook a little. He seemed unable to stop looking at it. He wanted to watch the creature's face because that was where the danger felt strongest, but his eyes kept being pulled back to the taxidermy cat. There was something deeply wrong about seeing a dead animal carried like decoration on another animal's body. The narrator in the review video was still talking, but his voice stayed muffled. It rose and fell in tone, like he was making a point, maybe explaining what the creature represented or how viewers had reacted to it. But in the dream, I did not care about the explanation. I was locked onto the footage. Everything felt too still and too tense. The bathroom stayed dim. The hallway stayed bright. The food bowl sat on the floor between the owner and the cats. The normal cat, the pink cat begged and stared. The dead tabby sat on its shoulder with cloudy eyes. Nothing happened, and somehow that made it worse. I expected the pink cat to eat. I expected it to lower its long neck and begin chewing in some horrible way. I expected the normal cat to wait until it was done, then move forward. Or I expected the creature to attack. Maybe it would crawl into the bathroom. Maybe it would stand up even taller. Maybe it would speak in a human voice. That is how these kinds of things usually go, especially in analog horror. You wait for the jump scare. You wait for the impossible movement. You wait for the creature to finally show what it can do. But it never did. The pink cat did not eat. The normal cat did not eat. The owner did not move closer. Everyone stayed trapped in that one terrible moment, as if the entire house was holding its breath. I remember feeling that the owner had no idea how the creature got inside. That was not said clearly, but the feeling was there. This was not his pet. This was not something he had chosen. This horrifying pink animal had somehow entered his home, and now it was part of the routine. It waited with his real cat. It demanded food. It wore dead cats on its body. And the owner, for some reason, was feeding it. The dream then shifted, not to a new scene exactly, but to the video's thumbnail. I saw it clearly, like I was looking at the YouTube page or maybe the review video paused on my screen. The thumbnail showed a picture or painting of the pink cat staring directly at the camera. In that image, it had more taxidermy cats stapled to its body. Not just the one brown tabby on its shoulder, but several. They were attached in different places, stiff and lifeless, their cloudy eyes facing outward. The pink cat looked proud in the thumbnail. Not happy exactly, but aware. Its bright pink fur filled most of the frame, and its dark blue sparkling eyes and mouth seemed to shine brighter than everything else. It looked like it knew people were watching. It looked like it wanted to be seen. That was where the dream ended. There was no chase, no attack, no explanation. The pink cat never ate the food. The normal cat never got its turn. The owner never screamed. He just stood there in the dim bathroom, staring at this impossible animal that had somehow gotten into his home, while it stared back and begged for a meal it did not even touch. When I woke up, I felt confused more than scared at first. I lay there thinking about it, trying to figure out where the image had come from. I do not have a fear of cats. I never have. I like cats. Normal cats do not scare me at all. I was not watching cat videos before bed, at least not that I remember. I did not stay up extremely late. I had not taken any medication. I had not used drugs. There was no clear reason for my brain to create something so specific and so disturbing. But the more awake I became, the more uncomfortable the dream felt. It was the details that bothered me. The bathroom with no light on. The hallway glow. The food bowl being placed just outside the door. The normal cat waiting calmly beside something that should not exist. The pink fur that looked fake, like cheap fabric stretched over bones. The long legs. The restless body. The loud, desperate meowing. The face with dark blue sparkling eyes, nose, and mouth. The dead tabby cat fixed to its shoulder, sitting there like a trophy or a warning. I kept thinking about the normal cat. Why was it so calm? Did it know the pink cat? Had it accepted it? Was it afraid but too used to the fear to react? There was something awful about the way it waited. It made me think this had happened many times before. Maybe every night. Maybe every morning. Maybe the owner had been filling 2 bowls for a while, even though one of the animals in his house was not supposed to be there. And I kept thinking about the taxidermy cats. In the thumbnail, there were several of them attached to the pink cat's body. That made the one in the footage feel like the beginning of something, or maybe only one piece of a bigger pattern. Did the pink cat collect cats? Did it replace them? Did the normal cat know that one day it might end up stapled to that shaggy pink body too? Was that why it never moved before the pink cat? The dream did not answer anything. It only showed me the creature and left me with it. All day, I have had this strange feeling that the dream was a piece of something larger, like I had watched one clip from a horror series that does not exist, or maybe does exist somewhere in a part of the internet I have never seen. I know that sounds ridiculous. Dreams borrow pieces from things we have seen and mix them into new shapes. Maybe my brain took cats, analog horror, old movie posters, fake fur, and taxidermy, then threw them together for no reason. But it did not feel random. It felt designed. The pink cat felt like something with rules. It did not just appear and act scary. It had a place in that house. It had a relationship with the normal cat. It had a routine with the owner. It had a body decorated with dead cats, like each one meant something. It looked wrong in a way that felt too exact. I do not know what the dream means. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe it was just one of those strange things the brain creates while sleeping, then leaves behind like a mess you have to clean up after waking. But I cannot stop seeing that bathroom doorway. I cannot stop hearing the food hit the bowl. I cannot stop imagining the tall pink cat shifting its thin legs, meowing again and again, while its glittering dark blue eyes stay locked on the person feeding it. The part that scares me most is not that the creature was in the house. It is that everyone in the dream seemed to understand it was already too late to make it leave. The owner did not call for help. The normal cat did not run. The pink cat did not hide. It stood there like it belonged there now, like it had been accepted, not because anyone wanted it, but because fighting it was no longer possible. And maybe that is why the dream stayed with me. It was not about a monster breaking into a home. It was about a monster becoming part of the home. It was about something unnatural, being allowed to stand beside something normal until even the normal thing stopped reacting. It was about fear turning into routine. It was about the owner placing the food bowl down, because that was what he did now, even though every part of him knew the pink cat should not exist. I still do not know why my brain made it. I do not know why it chose a pink cat, or a dim bathroom, or a taxidermy tabby with cloudy blue eyes. I do not know why the creature's face looked the way it did, or why the narrator's voice was muffled, or why the dream ended before the cats ate. But I know this. If I ever see an analog horror video about a tall pink cat with long legs and dead cats stapled to its body, I am not clicking on it. Because in the dream, that creature did not feel like something made for a video. It felt like something the video had accidentally recorded. Story 4. I am in a kind of pain I do not know how to name. Angst is the closest word I can find, but even that feels too small. It is not just sadness. It is not just fear. It is not just anger. It is all of those things mixed together inside my chest, turning over and over until I feel sick from it. Everything around me feels unreal right now. The house feels wrong. The pictures on the walls feel wrong. Even my own memories feel wrong, like someone has taken them out of my head, changed them while I was not looking, and put them back in the same places. My wife and I were together for 35 years. That is most of a lifetime. When you spend that long beside someone, you stop thinking of your life as yours and theirs. It becomes one thing, one story, one long road that you walk together. You remember the young years, when you had no money but somehow still believed everything would be fine. You remember the first little apartment, the old furniture, the bills stacked on the kitchen table, and the way love made all of it feel less heavy. You remember the fights, too. You remember the slammed doors, the long silences, the nights one of you slept facing the wall. But after so many years, even the ugly moments become part of the shape of the life you built. We married young. Too young, some people said. We were both still figuring out who we were, but we were sure about one thing. We loved each other. That was enough for us back then. We did not have much, but we had hope, and when you are young, hope can feel like money in your pocket. It can make you believe that any hard thing can be handled if you hold on tight enough. About 10 years after we got married, we had our child, our daughter. At least, that is what I have believed for most of my life. Even writing that sentence makes my hands feel weak now. I do not know how to talk about it anymore. I do not know how to say our daughter without hearing the words my wife said before she died. I do not know how to look at old family photos without wondering what was real and what was built on a lie that was too large for one person to carry. I still remember the day my wife went into labor. I was at work when it happened. Back then, I had a job that kept me on my feet all day. It was not glamorous work, but it paid the bills. We needed every dollar because a baby was coming, and babies cost money before they even take their first breath. We had already spent months getting ready. The nursery was painted. The crib was built. Little clothes were folded in drawers. Tiny blue socks, tiny blue shirts, a small blanket with little cars on it. We had been told again and again that we were having a boy. The doctors said it with confidence. Our families knew. Our friends knew. My wife and I had talked about names for months. We had imagined a son. I had imagined teaching him things. How to ride a bike, how to throw a ball, how to fix a loose handle on a cabinet. I had pictured a little boy with my wife's eyes, or maybe my nose, running through the yard, laughing while I chased him. It is strange how a child can become real in your mind long before you ever meet them. I had never held him, but I already loved him. When my wife's water broke, she did not call me the way I expected. I thought she would be scared. I thought she would say, "Come now," and I would leave work without even clocking out. But that is not what happened. She paged me and told me she was going to the hospital, and when I called her back, her voice sounded strange. Not exactly calm, but controlled. Tight, like she was trying very hard to sound normal. I told her I was leaving right away. She said no. At first, I thought I had heard her wrong. I actually laughed a little because it made no sense to me. I told her she was crazy if she thought I was going to miss the birth of my child. I said I would be there as fast as I could. That was when she started screaming at me. I had never heard her scream like that before. Not at me. Not really. We had argued plenty of times in our marriage, but this was different. This was panic. She told me to stay where I was. She told me not to come to the hospital yet. She kept saying she was fine and that I needed to finish my shift. I thought maybe the pain and fear had gotten to her. I thought maybe labor was making her act in ways she would not normally act. People always talk about birth hormones and stress and how women can say things they do not mean when they are in that kind of pain. So I stayed. I hate myself for that now. At the time, it seemed like the right thing to do because she was begging me so hard. I told myself she must have had a reason. Maybe she wanted her mother there first. Maybe she did not want me panicking in the hospital room. Maybe she thought I would lose my job if I left. I kept working, but my mind was not at work anymore. Every minute felt longer than the last. I kept checking the clock. I kept imagining her in a hospital bed, holding the rails, breathing through the pain, waiting for our baby to come. As soon as I clocked out, I drove to the hospital like a madman. I do not remember stopping for red lights, though I must have. I only remember the feeling in my chest, that mix of fear and excitement, like I was racing toward the rest of my life. But when I got there, my wife was gone. At first, I thought there had been a mistake at the front desk. I gave her name, and the woman behind the counter looked through the system. She frowned, typed something, checked again, and told me she did not see her listed. I told her that was impossible. My wife had gone into labor. She had come here. There had to be a room. There had to be a record. The hospital was busy that day. People were moving everywhere. Nurses hurried past with carts. Families sat in waiting areas with tired faces. Babies cried somewhere down the hall. Phones rang. A man argued with someone near the elevators. The whole place felt too full, too loud, too bright. And in the middle of it, I felt like I had been dropped into a dream where no one understood what I was saying. I went from desk to desk. I asked nurses. I checked the maternity floor. I called her mother. But there was no answer. My panic grew with every minute. The more people told me they did not know where she was, the more my mind started making terrible pictures. Had something happened on the way? Had she gone to another hospital? Had there been an emergency? Had the baby come too early? Then my pager started beeping. I looked down and saw my wife's number. I was so confused that for a second, I just stared at it. Then, I ran to the nearest phone I could find and called her back with shaking hands. She answered like nothing strange had happened. She asked me where I had been. I remember gripping the phone so tightly my fingers hurt. I asked her what she meant. I told her I was at the hospital. I told her I had been looking everywhere for her. She sounded tired, but not scared. She said she was already home. Home, I thought I was going to lose my mind. We went back and forth for a minute, both of us getting more upset. I asked why she had left. I asked why the hospital had no record of her. I asked why she had told me not to come. She kept saying she would explain later. She said she was exhausted. She said the baby was fine. Then she said the words that stopped me. She is beautiful, she. I did not even understand at first. I thought I had misheard her again. I asked her to repeat it. She said, our daughter. She is beautiful. I drove home so fast I barely remember the road. When I got there, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I expected movement. Maybe crying, maybe her mother rushing around, maybe the kind of chaos people talk about when a newborn comes home. Instead, the living room was dim, and my wife was curled up in her favorite chair. She looked exhausted in a way I had never seen before. Her skin was pale. Her hair was damp and messy. Her eyes were red like she had been crying for hours. In her arms was a baby girl. I stood there in the doorway, unable to move. Under normal circumstances, that should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. My child was home. My wife was alive. I was a father. But instead of pure joy, all I felt at first was confusion. A heavy, sharp confusion that made everything around me feel slightly wrong. We had been told we were having a boy. Not once, not maybe, not we are not sure. The doctors had said boy. The paperwork said boy. The gifts from friends were for a boy. The clothes in the nursery were for a boy. The name we had chosen was for a boy. My wife explained it quickly. Too quickly, maybe, She said there had been some kind of mistake with the paperwork. She said the hospital had mixed something up. She said the doctors had been wrong, and then some records had made it worse. She said it did not matter because our baby was healthy. It was an expensive mistake, I suppose. We had spent hundreds of dollars on clothes, toys, blankets, and little decorations meant for a son. But in that moment, money did not seem important. Nothing seemed important except the baby in her arms. My mother-in-law was there too, sitting quietly near the window. She looked worn out and pale, and she did not seem interested in explaining anything. When I asked questions, she avoided my eyes. I thought she was just tired. I thought the birth had been hard. I thought maybe something had happened that no one wanted to talk about yet. So I let it go. I let myself be happy. I was a new father. I had waited 9 months for that moment. I was not going to let some paperwork mistake ruin it. I stepped closer, and my wife handed me the baby. She was so small that I was afraid to breathe too hard while holding her. Her face was red and wrinkled, her eyes closed tight, her tiny fists curled near her chin. She made a soft little sound, and something inside me broke open. I loved her instantly. That first night at home, I stayed awake with my wife and our baby girl. I rubbed my wife's back while she cried quietly into the pillow. I held the baby when she cried. I warmed bottles. I changed diapers badly, and then learned to do it better. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched them sleep in each other's arms. I remember thinking that this was the start of a new life. Not the life I had pictured exactly, but still beautiful, still ours. From that moment on, I worked harder than I had ever worked before. I wanted to give them a decent life. I wanted my wife to feel safe. I wanted my daughter to have everything she needed. I worked long hours. I took extra shifts when I could. I kept food on the table and the lights on in the house. I fixed things myself because we could not always afford to call someone. I saved money every month for bigger gifts. Jewelry for my wife when anniversaries came around. A swing set for our daughter when she was old enough to play outside. A little bike with training wheels. Birthday cakes. School clothes. Christmas mornings that made her eyes light up. Watching my daughter grow up was one of the most magical experiences of my life. I remember her first steps. She fell into the coffee table and cried, then got angry at the table like it had done it on purpose. I remember her first day of school. She wore a little dress and held her backpack straps with both hands. She tried to look brave, but her bottom lip kept shaking. My wife cried in the car after we dropped her off. I pretended not to cry, but I did. Years moved forward the way they always do. Too slowly when you are tired. Too quickly when you look back. Our daughter grew from a little girl into a smart, funny, stubborn young woman. She had a laugh that filled the house. She hated peas. She loved old movies. She talked too fast when she was excited. She asked endless questions. She was not perfect, but she was ours. She was mine. At least, that is what I believed. There were small things, of course. Little things people mentioned without meaning anything by them. Nobody ever said she looked like me. Nobody ever said she had my eyes or my smile. Nobody said she looked much like her mother either. When she was a baby, people would look at her and say things like, "She is beautiful," or "What a sweet face." But they never said, "She looks just like you." As she got older, the difference became more obvious. If I am being honest, I noticed it too. Her hair was different from ours. Her face had a shape I could not connect to either side of the family. Her eyes were not mine, not my wife's, not her grandparents'. Sometimes, when she stood between us in family photos, there was a small, strange feeling in the back of my mind. A question I never allowed to become words. But it did not change how I loved her. Blood is powerful, But so are bedtime stories. So are scraped knees. So are school plays, bad report cards, late-night fevers, and teaching someone how to drive in an empty parking lot. I had held that girl when she was sick. I had checked under her bed for monsters. I had sat through every school concert, even the ones that sounded like a room full of dying birds. I had hugged her through heartbreak. I had walked her across the stage of life 1 year at a time. She was my daughter in every way that mattered to me. When she graduated high school, I cried harder than I expected. She walked across that stage in her cap and gown, and for a moment, I saw every version of her at once. The baby in my arms, the little girl with missing front teeth, the teenager rolling her eyes at me from across the dinner table, the young woman stepping into the world. My wife squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. We were proud. We were happy. It felt like our fairy tale had survived everything life had thrown at us. But every fairy tale ends. Ours began to end when my wife was diagnosed with cancer. I still remember the doctor's face. Professional, careful, kind in that distant way doctors are when they have delivered bad news too many times. My wife sat beside me, quiet, her hands folded in her lap. I kept asking questions because questions made me feel like I was doing something. What stage? What treatment? What were the chances? How fast did we need to act? The doctor answered, but the room felt like it was moving farther and farther away from me. Those were the hardest years of my life. I watched the woman I loved lose pieces of herself. First her strength, then her appetite, then her hair, then the light in her face. Some days she tried to joke about it. She wore scarves and said she looked mysterious. She smiled, so I would not be scared. But at night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard her crying in the bathroom. I was by her side every day. Our daughter was too, as much as she could be. She was going to a state university about 100 miles away by then, trying to build her own life while still carrying the fear of losing her mother. She came home on weekends. She called constantly. She brought little gifts, soft blankets, books, tea, anything she thought might help. But cancer does not care about love. It does not care about effort. It does not care how many years you have been married or how many things you still need to say. It takes and takes until there is almost nothing left. On the day we lost her, our daughter was in class at the university. She had wanted to come home that morning, but my wife told her not to. She said she was having a better day. She said there was no need to miss class. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. I thought we had more time. People always think they have more time until they do not. I was alone with my wife when the end came. The room was quiet, except for the soft sound of the machines and her breathing. She looked smaller than she had ever looked. I sat beside her bed and held her hand. Her skin felt thin and cool. I kept telling her I loved her. I kept telling her she had done enough, that she could rest. I do not know if those were the right things to say, but they were all I had. In those last moments, she looked at me with the same love she had in her eyes when we first met. I saw the young woman I married. I saw the person who had laughed with me in our first apartment and danced with me in our kitchen when we had no money. But the love in her eyes was different now. It was heavier, sadder, full of memory, like she was seeing our whole life at once and understanding that it was almost over. Then her face changed. Her smile faded. Her forehead wrinkled. Her eyes filled with tears, and she started sobbing. Not soft crying, not the kind of crying that comes from pain. This was grief. This was terror. This was a secret, tearing its way out of her after being buried for decades. I leaned closer and asked what was wrong. She shook her head at first. She tried to turn away, but she was too weak. Her fingers tightened around mine. Her mouth opened and closed like she was fighting herself. I told her it was okay. I told her she could tell me anything. I thought maybe she wanted to apologize for some old argument. I thought maybe she was afraid of dying. I thought maybe she wanted me to promise to take care of our daughter. Then she said our son's name, the name we had chosen before the birth. I froze. She had not said that name in years, not once. After our daughter came home, we packed away the blue clothes and changed the nursery. The name disappeared with them. It became something from a different life, a path we had not taken. But she said it again. Then she told me the truth. Our son had died at birth. There had been complications. Something went wrong. The doctors tried, but he did not make it. My wife held him for only a short time before they took him away. She said when they told her he was gone, something inside her mind broke. She could not accept it. She refused to believe that after 9 months of carrying him, after all the hope and waiting and love, she would leave the hospital with empty arms. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to tell her not to say another word. I wanted to stay in the life I knew for just a few minutes longer. But she kept talking. There had been another baby, a baby girl. She did not belong to us. My wife said she saw her somehow. Maybe in the nursery. Maybe in a room nearby. Her words were broken, and I could not understand every detail. She was crying too hard. She said the baby was alone for a moment. She said no one was watching closely enough. She said her mother helped her. She said they left before anyone realized what had happened. Our daughter was stolen. The words did not feel real at first. They were too large. Too impossible. They filled the room and pushed all the air out of it. I just stared at my wife, waiting for her to take it back, waiting for her to say she was confused because of the medicine or the pain. But her eyes were clear. Broken, yes, but clear. She had carried the truth for almost 25 years. I thought back to that day at the hospital, her screaming at me to stay away, the missing records, her already being home, her mother refusing to meet my eyes, the paperwork mistake, the baby girl in her arms, all the little things I had buried because love made burying them easier. Suddenly, everything made sense. That is the part that has nearly destroyed me. I want to say I was shocked because I never suspected anything, but that would not be completely true. Some small part of me had always known there was a shadow there. I had felt it in the strange beginning, in the unanswered questions, in the way my wife's face changed whenever I brought up the birth. I had ignored it because the life that came after was beautiful. Because my daughter was my daughter. Because sometimes people choose peace over truth without even realizing they are doing it. My wife died not long after telling me. One moment she was looking at me, crying and whispering that she was sorry. The next, her hand loosened in mine. The machines changed their sound. Nurses came in. People moved around me, but I could not move. I sat there with her confession still hanging in the air, watching the woman I loved leave the world after handing me a truth I did not know how to carry. Our daughter called 20 minutes later. I could not answer. I watched the phone ring and ring until it stopped. Then it started again. Her name on the screen. My daughter. Someone else's daughter. The child I raised. The child another family lost. The child who had no idea that the woman she called Mom had stolen her from a hospital because grief had turned into madness. I still have not found the heart to tell her. How do you say something like that? How do you sit across from the person you raised and say, your mother was not your mother, not by blood, and I may not be your father, but I loved you every day of your life? How do you explain that her whole beginning was built on another family's nightmare? How do you tell her that somewhere, maybe, there were people who spent their lives searching for a baby girl who had been sleeping in our house the whole time? I have looked at old photos until my eyes burned. I have gone through boxes in the closet, hospital papers, baby bracelets, old bills. Nothing is right. Some things are missing. Some things look fake. Some things were probably changed or destroyed long before I ever thought to question them. I do not know what happens next. I do not know if I should go to the police. I do not know if there are still records somewhere. I do not know if another family is out there, broken by a loss they never understood. I do not know if telling the truth will heal anything, or only destroy the last good thing left from my life. All I know is that my wife is gone, my son died before I ever held him, and the daughter I love more than my own life was stolen before she ever knew her real name. And I am sitting in this house, surrounded by 35 years of memories, wondering how much of my life was love, how much was grief, and how much was a lie. Story 5. My name is Thaddeus Owens, and I have been clean for about 3 months now. I wish I could say that with pride. I wish I could say those 3 months have felt like freedom, like I woke up one morning and the sun looked brighter, and my body finally belonged to me again. That is what people want to hear when you tell them you stopped using. They want a success story. They want you to smile and say life is beautiful now. They want you to say everything was worth it. The truth is uglier than that. Being clean has been hard, boring, painful, and lonely. Some days it feels like I am living inside someone else's body. My hands do what they are supposed to do. My mouth says the right things. I go to work. I come home. I eat food I can barely taste. I sleep badly. I wake up tired. I tell everyone I am fine because that is what they need to hear. But sometimes, when I am honest with myself, I miss who I was when I was high. I know how bad that sounds. I know it makes me sound weak. Maybe I am weak. Maybe that is the whole problem. But when I was high, the world felt softer around the edges. My mistakes did not hurt as much. My shame did not stand so close. I could ignore the broken parts of myself for a little while. I could feel warm and safe and far away from everything I had ruined. I knew I needed to get clean when my girlfriend moved out in the middle of the night. Her name was Melissa, and she had stayed longer than she should have. I thought I hid things well from her, but I guess that is what all addicts think when they are high out of their minds. We think we look normal. We think our lives sound smooth. We think no one notices the sweating, the shaking, the missing money, the mood swings, the locked bathroom doors, the strange friends, the excuses that change every time we tell them. She noticed all of it. She just stopped fighting about it. That hurt more than the yelling ever did. The night she left, I woke up around 3 in the morning and heard drawers opening quietly in the bedroom. I was sleeping on the couch because she had stopped wanting me near her. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw her standing in the dim hallway with a suitcase in one hand and her phone in the other. Her face looked tired, not angry, not even sad, just tired in a way that made her seem much older than she was. I asked where she was going. She said, "Somewhere you can't follow me like this." Then she left. I did not stop her. I did not even stand up. I just watched the door close and listened to her car start outside. The worst part was that I wanted to chase her, but I was too sick and too numb to move. By morning, I hated myself enough to call my parents. 2 days later, I was in rehab. When I was in treatment, my friends and family came to give me an intervention. They sat in a plain room with bad lighting and cheap chairs, holding papers in their hands like they were about to give a speech at a funeral. My mother cried before she even started talking. "You don't have to rely on drugs to be happy," my sister said, reading from her paper with a shaking voice. "Please," my mother whispered. "I want my sweet boy back." My best friend, Aaron, looked like he had not slept. "Dude, this isn't you. Remember how much fun we had sober? Remember when we used to just hang out, play games, go to movies, and not need anything else?" I wanted to tell him I did not remember. Not really. I remembered the shape of those days, but not the feeling. It all seemed like something that happened to someone else. Their words should have helped me. Maybe they did, in some small way. But at the time, all that reassurance only gave me a headache. My skin was crawling. My stomach was twisting. I had chills so bad my teeth clicked together. I felt like my bones were full of insects. Withdrawal lasted about 2 weeks. At least, that is when the worst of it ended. I was doing a lot of drugs before I stopped. More than I admitted to anyone. More than I admitted to myself. I had built my days around using. I used to wake up and think about it before I thought about food, water, work, or the people who loved me. That is not a life. That is a cage you walk into willingly, then forget where the door is. After my 3rd week, my parents finally felt comfortable enough to let me stay with them. They tried to act normal, but I could tell they were watching me. My father counted the pills in the medicine cabinet. My mother knocked on my bedroom door too often. They both pretended not to notice when I came downstairs at night and stood in the kitchen just to feel less alone. I hated them for watching, and I hated myself for giving them a reason. Now it is my 3rd month drug-free. Most days are not terrible. Most days are just empty. I have a job now, which everyone says is a big step. I work at a grocery store on the east side of town. It is not glamorous work, but it pays enough for gas, phone bills, and a little rent to my parents. I stock shelves, bag groceries, clean spills, and smile at people who barely look at me. Sometimes old ladies call me sweet. Sometimes kids stare at the scars on my arms. Sometimes my manager gives me extra work because I am too nervous to say no. The store is open late. That means we get all kinds of people after dark. Tired parents, drunk college kids, night shift workers buying energy drinks, lonely people who walk up and down the aisles without buying anything, people who smell like cigarettes, rain, and bad choices. During my 1st week, I noticed a regular customer. He came in every time I was working. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. He was a thin man with a dirty gray hoodie, patchy beard, and eyes that never seemed to focus on one thing for more than a second. He moved like he was listening to music no one else could hear. He would drift through the aisles, pick things up, put them back, and sometimes forget where he was standing. I recognized the look. I hated that I recognized it. Sometimes he would stop near my register and try to talk to me. His words usually came out as mumbles, broken sentences, half-formed thoughts. He would say things like, "They put the lights too high," or "You ever hear the freezers breathing?" Once he leaned close and asked if I could see the white worms in the bananas. I told myself he was just high. I told myself he was harmless. A few times I saw him go into the bathroom and stay there too long. I knew what that meant. I had been that guy before. The first time it happened, I almost told my manager. Then I remembered all the people who had looked at me like trash when I was using. I remembered the shame of being watched and whispered about, so I stayed quiet. Last night was the last time I saw him. I was facing cans in aisle 4 when I heard someone scream from the back of the store. Not a startled scream, not the kind people make when they see a mouse or slip on spilled milk. This was deep and sharp. The kind of scream that makes every person stop moving at once. I ran toward the bathrooms with 2 other employees. A customer stood outside the men's room with both hands over her mouth. She kept saying, "He's not breathing, he's not breathing." My manager pushed past us and went in. I stayed near the doorway, frozen. The man in the gray hoodie was on the bathroom floor. His body was twisted beside the sink. His face was pale, almost blue. His mouth hung open. There was a smear of something dark near his lips. One of his hands was curled against his chest like he had tried to grab himself before he fell. Someone called 911. Paramedics came fast, but not fast enough. They worked on him on the bathroom floor while the rest of us stood outside pretending not to listen. After a while, they stopped moving with urgency. That was how I knew he was gone. They wheeled him out under a sheet. Nobody said much after that. My manager looked shaken, but he tried to hide it. A police officer asked a few questions. The bathroom was taped off for cleaning later. One employee whispered that it was just another junkie death. And I felt something twist inside me. Just another junkie death. That was what I could have been. That was what I still might become. I should have gone home after my shift. I should have stayed far away from that bathroom. But for some reason, I could not stop thinking about it. I needed to see the place where he died. Maybe I wanted to scare myself. Maybe I wanted proof that I had chosen a different path. Maybe some sick part of me wanted to stand close to death and feel stronger than it. Near closing time, when no one was watching, I slipped past the tape and went inside. The bathroom smelled like bleach, sweat, and something sour underneath. The floor was still dirty in places. The mirror above the sink had a crack in one corner. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where his body had been. Then I saw it. A pill bottle behind the toilet. It was lying on its side, half hidden in the shadow between the wall and the plumbing. The label was mostly peeled off. I could not read the name. I could not even tell if it was prescription, street garbage, or something else entirely. Every sensible part of me screamed not to touch it. My stomach tightened. My hands went cold. I thought of my mother crying in rehab. I thought of Melissa leaving in the middle of the night. I thought of my 3 months clean, all that pain, all that effort, all those boring empty days that were supposed to mean I was getting better. Then I picked up the bottle. It rattled in my hand. That sound did something to me. It went straight through my chest like a key turning in a lock. I opened it before I could think too much. There were small pills inside, plain, pale, and harmless looking. I did not know what they were. I did not care. That is the part people do not understand. Addiction does not always ask what something is. Sometimes it only asks, will this change how I feel? I swallowed a couple of them dry. Then I stood there with the empty bathroom around me and waited to hate myself. The hate did not come right away. The pills kicked in fast. At first I felt warmth spread through my arms and chest. Then the world sharpened. I had never felt anything like it. Every color became bright and alive. The yellow bathroom sign on the door looked like it had sunlight trapped inside it. The red soap dispenser glowed like a fresh wound. The silver faucets shined so clearly I could see tiny scratches in the metal, each one catching the light in its own way. Every sound became crisp. The buzz of the fluorescent light was no longer just a buzz. It had layers. A high electric whine, a soft clicking behind it, a deep hum inside the walls. I could hear water moving through pipes. I could hear air pushing through vents. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, steady and powerful. I could feel every hair on my body move. I could feel my shirt touching my shoulders, the cold tile under my shoes, the tiny shift of air when I breathed. It was like I had spent my whole life wrapped in plastic, and now someone had peeled it away. Nothing I had ever taken before had made me feel like that. For a little while, I forgot the dead man. I forgot rehab. I forgot my mother, Melissa, my job, my shame. I only stood there in the bathroom, looking at the world as if it had finally decided to show itself to me. The only problem was that the feeling did not last long. By the time I finished my shift, the colors were already fading. The world became dull again, and with the dullness came fear. I could feel the old emptiness coming back. It slid over me like cold mud. The pill bottle had been half full when I found it. By the time I left the store, it was closer to a quarter full. Every time the colors started to fade, I took another. Every time my body began to feel numb again, I took another. I told myself I was not getting high. Not exactly. This was different. This was seeing. This was waking up. I nearly jumped out of my skin when my manager came up behind me near the stockroom. "Thaddeus," he said. "You okay? You look pale." His voice sounded normal. But when I turned and looked at his face, my breath caught. I had never seen a demon before, but if I had to imagine one, that was what it would look like. His skin was stretched too tight over the wrong bones. His eyes were black pits with tiny red points burning deep inside. His mouth was wider than it should have been, full of thin teeth that moved even when he was not speaking. Something curled under his skin, like worms sliding beneath rubber. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why he was always pushing extra work on me. Why he looked at me first when something went wrong. Why he watched me with that fake concern in his face. He was not just a bad manager. He was a demon. He enjoyed my suffering. Maybe he had been feeding on it all along. "Thaddeus?" he said again. His face twisted. For a second, I saw the demon clearly. Then the shape folded back into his normal face, like a mask being pulled over something terrible. I understood then. I was coming down. His tricks had more power when the pills wore off. "I'm sick," I said quickly. "I need to leave early," he frowned. "Are you sure? After what happened tonight, maybe you should sit down for a minute." No. He wanted me weak. He wanted me dull. He wanted me blind again. "I have to go," I said. He let me leave, probably so I would not get suspicious of his true nature. Or maybe he knew it was already too late. Maybe he could smell the sight on me. As soon as I stepped outside, I made a decision. I could not come down again. I had to keep seeing the real world. If I let the colors fade, the demons would hide again. They would put their human faces back on and walk around pretending to be people. They would smile at cash registers and drive cars and raise families and eat normal food while doing whatever evil things demons do behind closed doors. I looked at the pills in my hand. There were maybe 10 or 12 left. I swallowed all of them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the world opened. The streetlights became burning halos. The road stretched out in front of me like black glass. Every house had a glow around it, some pale and soft, others dark and pulsing like bruises. I could see stains in the air where bad things had happened. I could hear whispers coming from closed windows. I could smell fear, anger, sickness, and lies. And then I saw them. They were everywhere. A woman pushing a stroller walked past me on the sidewalk, but she was not a woman. Her skin shimmered, and beneath it I saw something with too many eyes and a long tongue pressed against sharp teeth. The baby in the stroller was no baby either. It had tiny horns under its little hat, and when it looked at me, it smiled with an adult's mouth. Across the street, a man got into his car. Only it was not a car. It was a heavy, scaled thing crouched on 4 wheels, breathing smoke through its front grille. The man patted its roof like a pet dragon before climbing inside its belly. A group of teenagers laughed outside a gas station. Their faces flickered between normal and monstrous. Some had black holes where their eyes should have been. Some had mouths in their necks. One had wings folded under a hoodie. I could see all of it. I was not crazy. I was awake. For the first time in my life, everything made sense. The world had been taken over by evil, and everyone was either blind to it or part of it. Maybe I was the only real person left. Maybe the man in the bathroom had known too. Maybe those pills were not drugs at all, but a kind of key. Maybe he had died because the demons found out he could see them. I had to use this ability. I had to save people. I walked down North Oak Street with my heart pounding and my senses burning. Every step made the sidewalk ripple with hidden marks. The trees leaned toward me like old watchers. The stars above looked wrong, too close and too sharp. Then I heard a woman scream. I turned. Halfway down the block, under a broken streetlight, I saw a demon attacking her. It was huge and bent over her, its arms wrapped around her body. Its face pushed close to hers as if it wanted to bite into her. The woman struggled and screamed, but no one came to help. Of course they did not. Maybe they could not see it. Maybe to them it looked normal. Maybe the demon had disguised itself as someone she loved. I looked around for a weapon. Near the curb, half hidden in weeds, was a rusty, broken knife. The blade was short and dirty. I picked it up without thinking. It felt right in my hand. Heavy, real, like the world had placed it there for me. I ran at the demon. It turned too late. I hit it hard and drove the knife into it. The demon made a choking sound and fell backward. The woman screamed louder. I pulled the blade free and stabbed again because I knew demons could be hard to kill. It tried to speak, but its words came out as wet gurgles. The woman backed away from me. Her face was gone. That was what I thought at first. The whole front of it looked wrong, blurred and melting in the bright colors. She had no eyes, no mouth, no normal features, just a pale smear shaking in terror. She had to be in so much pain. It's okay, I told her. I saved you. You're safe now. She kept screaming. I stepped toward her and raised my hands to show her I was not going to hurt her. Please calm down, I said. I can help you. She fell to her knees beside the demon. She reached for it, crying, making awful, broken sounds. I did not understand. Maybe it had poisoned her mind. Maybe she loved the thing because she could not see what it really was. Then more demons arrived. Bright lights flashed against the houses. A car stopped hard in the street. 2 demons jumped out, wearing dark uniforms. Their faces were partly hidden, but I could see through them. One had gray skin and long black eyes. The other looked stronger, older, full of power. Drop it, one shouted. The words hit me like stones. They wanted the knife. They wanted me helpless. The woman screamed. He stabbed him. He stabbed my husband. Husband, no, no, that was not right. The demon on the ground twitched. For 1 second, through the light and color and rushing blood in my ears, I saw something else. A man, just a man, lying in the street with blood spreading under him. Then his face changed again, showing teeth and shadows and evil. The demons rushed me. I tried to fight. I had to. If I fell, the world would stay blind. Evil would win. One of them grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back. I shouted and kicked. The other raised his hands, and suddenly my chest tightened. The pressure came fast. My lungs locked. I could not breathe. The harder I fought, the tighter my chest became. My vision pulsed red and gold. The demons shouted, but their words stretched and bent until they sounded like chanting. The woman was still screaming. Somewhere far away, a siren cried like an animal. I fell to the ground. The pavement was cold against my cheek. I tried to pull air into my lungs, but it would not come. My heart slammed once. Twice. Again. Too fast. Too hard. The colors around me became brighter than ever. The whole sky opened like a wound full of light. I thought of my mother. I thought of Melissa. I thought of the man in the bathroom. Maybe he had seen the same things before he died. Maybe he had tried to warn someone. Maybe no one listened. One of the demons knelt beside me. Its face flickered between monster and man. "Stay with me," it said. Liar, I tried to speak, but only a small sound came out. The last thing I saw before the light swallowed everything was the woman's face changing again. For one heartbeat, she looked human, terrified, crying, covered in blood that was not hers. Then she became faceless once more, and I knew I had failed. A voice broke through the darkness. It was distant and full of static. "Attention, dispatch. This is Squad Car 12. I need you to send an ambulance to North Oak Street." There was a pause. "Yeah, we've got 2 dead and 1 injured. Looks like a tweaker attacked a couple and overdosed when we caught him." Another pause. "No, he's not breathing," the voice faded. Then there was nothing.